One of the oldest tricks in storytelling is the switching sides motif, where a good guy has a dark descent into evil, or where a bad guy gets redemption to become good. Either way you cut it, it's been used time and time again across franchises. If you've been a fan of wrestling, we all know the old face heel turn, and it applies to Transformers as well, which is why we're going to have the topic that we have today thanks to TF Fan Geek's suggestion. This is going to be the top 10 faction switches, going back and forth from one side to the other in the latest GotBot Counts Down. Hey all, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, your most humble of hosts, Dennis Moulton, aka GotBot. As always, please like, comment, share, of course, subscribe, and while you're at it, light them up, baby. And hit that notification bell, please. It helps me out a ton. It lets you know when content of all sorts goes up here on the channel. Check out Machinery of Man, The Everything Factor, Transformers, Collectors, NL, The Autobot Family, Transformers vs. G.I. Joe vs. DC Universe vs. Marvel, and all of my social media links all down in the description below. If you want to help the channel, you can use the donate link. You can check us out on Patreon, see what we offer to you through Teespring, or of course you can hit the join button right here on YouTube and become a channel member. And this is going to be the top 10 kind of faction switches, you know, changing sides, going back and forth, face heel turns, if you will. Some of them are good guys becoming bad, some are bad guys becoming good, some are, you know, Autobot to Decepticon or Decepticon to Autobot, Maximal to Predacon or Predacon to Maximal. In a couple of cases, it's a little bit wishy-washy. We had votes roll in for everybody from Tripticon and Scorponok from the Marvel Comics to Transformers Prime, Predaking, and of course, animated Long Arm Prime. The big reveal there, of course, was that it was Shockwave. But none of them made the honorable mentions or the countdown. So we're going to go into the honorable mentions first. And the honorable mentions kick off with Transformers, Cyberverse, and Clobber. Clobber made the honorable mentions. I thought that Clobber was going to make it on the actual list, but not enough votes. Clobber was a Decepticon who wasn't really that bad and kind of decided eventually, you know what? This isn't really my way of doing things, and ended up becoming an Autobot. Octane, who we know stole Tripticon. I don't know if it was so much that Octane switched sides as Octane kind of went out on his own, although he did have a close friendship with Sandstorm. Rhinox, we all know there was like a dark descent that happened there across Beast Wars and Beast Machines. Who else? Sideways. And the last one that got an honorable mention was Armada Wheeljack, who I honestly thought was going to make the actual countdown. So that's your honorable mentions. So who actually made the list? Well, we're going to kick things off with number 10 first. And number 10 is probably the epitome of switching sides. In fact, very few, if any, do it as quickly and as frequently as this character. Who am I talking about? None other than Double Dealer. Of course, Double Dealer's only loyalty is kind of to the almighty dollar, so to speak. And, you know, depending on who's paying him the highest fee to do a certain job. This leads to a lot of trouble because, of course, he has no loyalty, and it's only for somebody to offer him a higher price, and that loyalty automatically changes. Even with his two partners, and yes, I know that this is the older generation's one, as of this recording, still waiting on the new one to arrive. But we all know that, you know, because his only loyalty is to the highest bidder, that he's able to switch sides very frequently. As a matter of fact, so frequently that he can switch between faction symbols of Autobot and Decepticon pretty much at will. If that's not somebody who deserves to be on the top 10 list for switching sides, then I don't know who does. And for that reason, he takes the number 10 slot. Now, number 9 is somewhat similar, but a little more dark in terms of the story, because originally number 9 started out as an Autobot who kind of went undercover as a Decepticon, but as time went on, sort of had a personality split to become two separate characters. Naturally, I'm talking about Punch and Counterpunch. my understanding of this character is that at his core, in his spark, he is by rights an Autobot who managed to infiltrate the Decepticons as Counterpunch. But the more he interacted with Decepticons and started to sort of identify with them, the more the Counterpunch persona sort of exerted itself within his body to become its own consciousness. It's pretty difficult to, you know, have a loyalty to the Decepticons or a loyalty to the Autobots when you kind of have a personality for each faction held within one body. And if there's any epitome for switching sides, it would have to be a good guy and a bad guy coexisting in the one form. For that reason, he takes the number 9 slot. And I'm glad that number 8 made it on the list, and I think number 8 made it on the list just under the wire, because the kind of version, the justification that's used here is the version from the recent Netflix War for Cybertron Siege series. In fact, Starscream wife herself even voted for this character. Who am I talking about? Impactor. Impactor, of course, was a rather violent Decepticon, somewhat high-ranking, but really got abandoned. He got injured, it was assumed he was destroyed, he got abandoned, and it was an Autobot. It was Ratchet who saved him, and of course part of that, as we know by now, is if I helped you, then you have to help everybody else here. And he began to identify with the Autobots. He began to identify really with no faction. He was just doing what the right thing was. And it ended up being such that he even became willing to self-sacrifice himself to save his friends when they were trying to do the right thing. I think it was actually Ratchet he saved. I don't recall for sure. It might have been, I could be wrong with that, it might have been Prowl actually. But needless to say, he went from being vicious Decepticon to self-sacrificing hero, and that definitely is the embodiment of a changing from one side to the other. Certainly a redemption story. And for that reason, he takes the number 8 slot. And number 7 is another redemption story going from Decepticon to Autobot. And this time it is the Armada Starscream. And while we know that through the rest of the Unicron trilogy, Starscream would probably become more evil than he's ever been, in Armada, he ended up kind of getting sick and tired of the abuse of Megatron and realized just how dangerous Unicron was, to the point that he was willing to sacrifice himself by attacking Unicron to show the Autobots and the Decepticons that the only way to really gain victory was if they worked together. He went so far as to really go on a kamikaze mission. No Starscream, no Decepticon would have done that before, but he saw the need for the greater good, and for that reason, he solidifies himself at the number 7 slot. Now, number 6 is more out of convenience, I would say, than really a redemption story, because it's Transformers Prime Knockout. And we all know that when Knockout saw the writing on the wall toward the end of the series, that, you know what, things are going down, he basically just walked in with the Autobots and said, I'm going with the winning team. And he ended up being put in a prison cell with a bunch of Viacons for it. Now, later on, he did, during Predacons Rising, actually betray Starscream. And he was there at the kind of the end when Optimus, you know, went through his other transformation to bring the Well of Allsparks back to life. In the end, I think factions didn't matter. But Knockout was one of those guys who kind of saw, like, you know what we're doing, man, it's not working. Might as well go with peace with the Autobots. Why not? Why not? Was it exactly switching sides? Maybe, because it happened at a convenience. Was it a glorious switching of sides? No. But it was certainly good enough to get this guy enough votes that he solidified himself at the number 6 slot. And here we are once again, and you know what time it is. That's right, it's the halfway mark. And I find that the one who takes the halfway mark is really interesting, because depending on the character, either this character went from evil to good because of love, or went from good to evil. Who am I talking about? Black Arachnia. Now, this is the animated Black Arachnia because it's the only one I have. The majority of votes came in for the Beast Wars Black Arachnia, with most people saying, look, she was destined really to be a good guy anyway, because her spark was from a maximal stasis pod, and her love for Silverbolt is what really caused her to change sides. And it was her love for Silverbolt in Beast Machines that really caused him to let his bitterness go. But then some people said, hey, in animated, there was the story of Alita 1's descent into evil to become Black Arachnia, as I understand it. I kind of don't remember animated now, but I do know I loved it. I really got to go back and rewatch that. Nevertheless, Black Arachnia has changed sides a couple of times. I prefer to stick with the Beast Wars iteration, where she changes it because her love for Silverbolt is so strong. That alone is just a beautiful story in and of itself, and it helps her take the number 5 slot. Number 4 may be the ultimate story of disillusionment with Megatron. That's right, Megatron switched sides a couple of times. He switched sides in Transformers Prime and in the IDW comics. When it came to the IDW comics, long story short is that he basically built up a friendship with Bumblebee. Bumblebee, during, I believe it was Dark Cybertron, got taken out by Shockwave when he was defending Megatron. And Megatron kind of realized, look, the original ideals that I had for the Decepticons, we've strayed from them. I've become so power hungry and tyrannical. This isn't the way it was supposed to be. This isn't the way it was supposed to happen. And he goes as far as to put like Bumblebee's insignia on his chest, declare himself an Autobot. He becomes a co-captain on the Last Light. He replaces his fusion cannon with like a toolkit. But that's not the only time that it happened. It also happened in Transformers Prime during Predacons Rising, when Megatron's body is revived by Unicron, only to be like a corporeal form. And the consciousness of Megatron is in pure servitude and slavery to Unicron and his whims. And it's exactly that reason that Megatron loses his taste for kind of domination over others and declares the Decepticons disbanded. When you can see the error of your ways and see how far you've gone off of your ideals, that's one heck of a redemption story. And nobody would do it better than arguably the ultimate evil, Megatron himself. And for that reason, he takes the number 4 slot. And that brings us to the top 3. And number 3 takes us to a character that has become popularized in recent years, who has, kind of like Windblade, been added to G1. But we've seen this character in other parts of the franchise, other iterations, such as Robots in Disguise 2015, such as the live-action movies. I'm talking, of course, about Drift, who we all know originally was the Decepticon Deadlock, and that's been alluded to often, but the story is most fleshed out, naturally, in the comics, where we learned that early on he was basically homeless, and was somehow picked up by Orion Pax when he was injured, and then he got repaired and sent back out. His friend, I think it was Gasket, was killed by like Autobot elites or something, and this guy became really bitter, was recruited by Megatron, became Deadlock, and done a lot of atrocities. Eventually he came in contact with the Circle of Light and learned that they were a group of Cybertronians who had left to avoid the war, and they were more pacifist and peaceful. That group is sort of discovered by Lockdown, and really Deadlock is given the ultimatum of, hey, you help us, you know, kind of take them out and get rid of the Circle of Light, or, you know, you die. So he was left in a rock and a hard spot, but when it came down to the very end, he defended the Circle of Light. He saw that, you know what, they were what he really wanted, that peace. And when he was recruited to the Decepticons, it was for fairness for all bots. It was under certain ideals that had been lost over time. And maybe he had lost a part of himself over time that he could now begin to work to find redemption to get back. It was a whole new Drift, a whole new body and a whole new attitude and a whole new personality, which meant a whole new identity. And that's when Deadlock became Drift. Funny enough, though, Drift also is noted for having a switch from Autobot to Decepticon. Kind of, because the version of him that appeared in Cyberverse was actually a Decepticon spy. And very quickly, he turned back to his evil Decepticon ways. So this is a case of a character that is best known for turning from Decepticon to Autobot with redemption. But it's not unprecedented for him to also go from Autobot to Decepticon because of deception. For that reason, this guy takes the number 3 slot. Now, number 2 had votes that came in from the movies, from the recent War for Cybertron Netflix series, and even from G1, but they all really speak to the same character, to the kind of same redemption story. I'm talking, of course, about Jetfire, or Skyfire if you prefer. If we're talking about the movies, we know that he basically sacrifices his body to become armor for Optimus Prime, That's why we get the whole Jetwing Prime. We know that in G1, he was a friend to Starscream, but when he sees the atrocities of the of the Decepticons and Megatron, he basically says, you know what? Like, no, I'm a scientist. This isn't the way I want to live, and he sides with the Autobots. And even recently in the Netflix series, he is a high-ranking official leader of the Seekers with Megatron, but he still has a certain honor to him, and like he doesn't want to, for example, attack someone from behind. And when he does fire from behind on Skywarp, he sort of then realizes, what am I doing? This isn't me. This isn't the ideals I live by. And when he sort of gets pushed out of the Decepticons and replaced by Starscream, the first thing he does is go to the Autobots. Say, you know what? This war needs to end, and Megatron's way isn't the way to do it. I'm here to help. You can believe me, you cannot believe me, but I'm here to help. He always has a story of, you know, kind of being on the fringe of the bad guys, but never really fitting in. And very quickly kind of learning that this isn't the way I want to live, and changing sides. And it's always been for the better, and for that reason, he takes the number 2 slot, and that only leaves us with the top spot. Now, if you've been around these parts for any length of time, then you know that we've kind of, in the last while anyway, been doing like a weekly top 10, and so far, the character who holds the record for the most votes for any list was number 1, Wheelie, being most annoying characters. But we have a new champion. This character must have switched sides the best because he has the most votes of any character on any list. This guy topped over 100 votes himself, and it is none other than Dinobot. Beast Wars Dinobot, definitely the one who switched sides the best according to everyone, because he started out as a Predacon, and he even wanted to have power over the Predacons over Megatron. That didn't happen. He very immediately challenged Optimus Primal to a fight where if he won, he was going to claim leadership of the Maximals. That didn't happen. He ended up siding with the Maximals because he realized that what Megatron was doing like kind of made no sense. It didn't work. Plus, he wasn't good at being subservient to Megatron's whims. But he wasn't liked, and he didn't really like the Maximals. He often said that, look, I might be working with you, but I'm still a Predacon at spark, or at heart, if you will. And he really struggled to kind of reconcile the fact that, like, I'm a bad guy by rights, but I'm trying to do good things. And it was always a journey for him, a long story arc of redemption, one that culminated in him kind of single-handedly staving off the Predacon forces in defense of really the entirety of humanity. To go from a murderous Predacon to really the self-sacrificing hero that made sure that humanity would actually exist down through the millennia, this guy had to take the number 1 slot and solidify his place as, you know, perhaps the ultimate hero. Of course, for that reason, he takes the number 1 slot. And there you have it. We went from 10 to 1 once again. And I kind of think that this is pretty much the way it should have panned out. A few things surprised me. Wild Wheel didn't get a vote. I would have had him on the list myself. Clobber, I expected on there. Wheeljack, or Armada Wheeljack, I totally expected to be on there. I think Dinobot being number 1 makes perfect sense. A long, drawn-out redemption story arc. I thought it was so good. Not even necessarily a redemption story arc, because he changed sides, and then it was kind of like having to prove himself. And I don't know if he ever felt like he was necessarily good enough, even though he valued honor above all else. I generally agree with this. I'm generally happy with how this went based on the votes from you guys. And when Tia Fangi first suggested this, and I took the image that went with the question when I posted it, I used the characters that I could think of, and there weren't even 10 there, so I was a little nervous if we were going to get enough, but there's a lot more backstories here than I ever thought. So, there we have it. Let me know what you guys think. I appreciate you coming by, giving me some of your extremely valuable time. Man, I do know how important it is to you. If you're in a position to help the channel to grow, don't forget we got a donate link down in the description. You can check us out on Patreon. You can see what we offer to you through Teespring, or of course you can hit the join button right here on YouTube and become a channel member. While you're at it, hit the subscribe button, stick around, have some fun with us. Don't forget that somehow, someway, each and every single day, man, you do make a difference. And I look forward to the next time that you and I get together to have another visit, either into live streams on Thursday nights at the stop motion premieres. And don't forget, we have one coming up later tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, Universal Collision Season 2, Episode 11, A Brewing Storm. Or, of course, the old-fashioned way, right here inside the videos.